And welcome to another recording of the Content Marketing Studio. We're back for another season to help you create better online content faster. Today, I'm going to put the spotlight on yet another content creator who's going to help us think about building our brand online and also drive sales for our business. I am your host, Pascal Fintoni, and today I am joined by none other than Roger Edwards. Roger, welcome back to the Content Marketing Studio.
Oh, Pascal, thank you so much for having me back. I think this is my third time on the show, although it is a couple of years since the last time I was on, so it's great to be back. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you very much. And for those of you who have know about Roger Edwards, let me remind you that Roger is a marketing consultant, international speaker, but also now a book author, which is the reason why he's with us. He's part of that mini-series that I've entitled Meet the Book Authors. His book, Cats, Mats, and Marketing Plans, has been, I suppose, a story of conquering the imposter syndrome, conquering essentially juggling busy agendas and so on. And I want to ask Roger essentially everything there is to know about creating that book, because Roger, you've pretty much have addressed all forms of marketing, copywriting, blogging, podcasting, video blogging and vlogging and so on. So why book authoring? Were you a glutton for more punishment?
I don't know, Pascal. I suppose I've always fancied writing a book, and even when I was younger, I used to write quite a lot. When I was younger, I used to write creative stuff. You wouldn't be surprised to know that when I was younger, I used to write lots of science fiction. In fact, I can remember one of my school reports, the English teacher, who was a lovely gentleman called Mr. Plowes, and I always have to give him a shout out. He actually wrote on my English report, he gave me an A, which was a pretty good score. And then he said something like, eager to do well and extremely hard working, and then in brackets he put, but he must remember that the subject is not just about creative science fiction, because pretty much all the time I was writing science fiction stories, because that was the time of Star Wars, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and all of that sort of thing. And all the way through my career as a marketing person, I was writing, whether it was press releases, whether it was newspaper articles, trade press articles, obviously brochures and technical guides and all of that sort of stuff. So I do like the sort of the printed word. And again, because my career has always been focused on this whole idea of keeping marketing simple, I feel as if I've got the way of being able to express myself in print quite succinctly and simply. And in fairness, all the other things you mentioned, like vlogging and blogging and video and all of that, that's much more recent. I've only been doing those things for about the last 7 or 8 years, where I've been writing for close to 3 decades now.
Right. Well, I didn't know that. So when you were writing those short stories, forgive me for asking, was it by hand? Did you have access to a typewriter? Did you do some, scrapbookings or something?
When I started, Pascal, it was all handwritten. I used to write with my little bio, and I used to go to the local newsagent shop, and they used to have these little books. They were called memo books, and I don't know, they probably had about 40 pages in, and they were about this big. They were half of A4, and they had lined paper. And what I would do is I would take the red cover off, the red cover that said memo book, and then I would actually draw the cover of the story. So whatever it was, Space Hijack or something like that, and then I would draw a picture, and then I would write it was almost like I was writing a mini novel, and then at the end on the back I would do the blurb as well. And then when I started writing at school, I got access to a school typewriter, so quite a lot of the stuff that I used to do when I was at school was typed up, so it looked a little bit more professional than my scrawly handwriting. But yeah, and then eventually I think I bought my first word processor probably about 25 years ago, and it was one of those ones which was almost like a typewriter, but it had a tiny little screen on with about 2 lines, and you couldn't really read. I mean, we're spoilt rotten with things like Word for Windows now, but, in those days, the fact that you could type it in and save it was just incredible.
We're going to talk obviously about your book and how it's going to help some of your future projects. But before we go on to that, just listening to you, have you ever been tempted to write a screenplay then?
Not really a screenplay.
Uh-huh.
I guess there's. I don't know. You'll know better than me with your film background, but there seems to be a way of writing a screenplay. You've got to know what the stage directions, the bits that are in brackets. I wouldn't know how to go about. A lot of the stuff that I used to write was quite descriptive,
Mm.
and written in the way a novel would be written, and I don't know whether I would be able to translate that into screenplay type annotation or whatever it is. But I always had this desire to write a blockbuster, either science fiction novel or spy novel, which would eventually be taken up by somebody who might then write a screenplay for me. But of course, that never happened.
No, I like that. Probably, I mean, I don't find writing nowhere near as easy as you do. As you know, I favor the visual storytelling, but I long for this idea of, finding the right words to express myself. And so, as part of this kind of series of interviewing people like you, I'm looking for, maybe the spark that's going to
Hmm.
make me make that leap. So,
Hmm.
do you have recollection of when you thought, right, enough is enough, I've waited long enough, I'm going to go for it? Was there a particular moment, or was it a series of events, people perhaps?
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure, Pascal, because as I say, I've always had it in my head that I would write a book. I was involved in a startup business back in 2001. It was a financial services firm which had the fabulous name of Bright Grey, and I was one of the founding directors of Bright Grey. And we always said right at the start that after we'd been going a few years, that we would write a book about how we started the business, and everybody looked to me to write that. But the idea of a business book was always there. I think that this particular book, Cats, Mats and Marketing Plans, happened at the Content Marketing Academy conference in 2017, which I think you
Right.
were at. Now, I did one of my sort of signature Keeping Marketing Simple talks at that conference, and it includes the what I call the cat sat on the mat speech or segment. And I'm not going to tell you viewers what that segment is here in the show, because they should go and read the book or actually see me do it on stage. But it's a really, really interesting way, and it's quite participative from an audience point of view, to get people to understand that simple language is better than complicated language. And on that particular day, I had something like 250 people, I nearly said 250,000 then, 250 people in a room shouting out, "Your cat sat on our mat." And I thought, wow, that is so powerful. And literally, a few days later, I did the same speech in Montenegro.
Mm.
I'd been invited to go to Montenegro to do this same speech, and I was flying to Montenegro, and I was sat on the plane, and I had this moment of imposter syndrome, which was almost like that horrible little voice in your ear saying, "Roger, what the hell are you doing sitting on this plane, flying to Montenegro to talk to people about keeping marketing simple?" And for anybody who experiences imposter syndrome, it's not a pleasant sensation. It's self-doubt. It's almost like that gnawing sensation downstairs. And the fact is, the people in Montenegro loved the speech as much as the people at Content Marketing Academy, even though they weren't English speaking as their first language, and maybe that was what I was worried about, that it wouldn't translate. But they loved it, and I sort of came away from that thinking, you know what, this is really powerful, and effectively, the cat on the mat is a story, and I realised that I've got stories from 2 decades worth of marketing career in all sorts of different levels within corporates and being out of corporates and being a consultant. And I just thought, why not string some of those stories together into a book? So I think it was a combination of those two conferences telling that cat on the mat story in two different countries that really made me think, right, now is the time to get on and do this.
Yes, and for our viewers and listeners, if you've not had the pleasure of hearing, even better, or reading the Cat on the Mat story, you're in for a treat. It's very, very special. So you make the decision to go ahead. What did you put in place then? Did you carve out time in your diary? Did you look for a different environment, for creativity? What did you put in place to support you?
Yeah, I think I always do my most creative stuff first thing in the morning, Pascal. So you usually have breakfast. My wife tends to go to the gym about 8 o'clock in the morning, and I tend to have from about 8 o'clock until 10:30, maybe 11 o'clock, where there's nobody else in the house, especially after our son left and went to university. So those are my core 3 hours of creative work. So it really wasn't too difficult to allocate some of that time to actually writing. But what I did struggle with was actually the physical sitting down and typing stuff out. It was almost like I had this head full of stories and a head full of ideas, but initially I did have a bit of a problem getting it out onto the paper or typing the words onto the screen. And I did play around with quite a few ideas. Like somebody had suggested that turn the screen off so you can't see the screen. Because what I'll do is I'll type something and then say, I don't like that, I'll edit it. But no, somebody said turn the screen off and then just type. Now, it doesn't matter whether you're typing spelling mistakes and there's no punctuation, just start firing it in. And that worked to a certain extent, but what I then discovered, funnily enough, was something that I, again, have been advocating others should do for years, and that is effectively using the dictation facility on the phones. iPhones and Androids, you can now just press a button and talk, and it effectively comes out on the screen. And eventually I settled into this pattern, getting myself a coffee and just sitting there and talking. And literally within half an hour, I'd have 2,000 words. And then I would effectively put that into Word, and then I would go through and do a bit of editing. And once I got into that sort of method of working, it absolutely flew onto the page.
Right.
I think it was just sitting and trying to type it from scratch. I found hard. I almost needed that, either turn the screen off or just say the words. And I've always been a big advocate of write like you talk anyway. So I guess maybe that was just the way it was going to be.
But is there a hint in there for aspiring book authors to maybe there's a phase of discovering your method unique to you, and it's maybe about trying different approaches that you're going to settle on something that is right for you. So can you remind me again the software that you use? So you were dictating on the phone, but how was it transcribed? Maybe I missed that.
Yeah, no, it's literally, Pascal, the iPhone for about the last probably about 6 or 7 years now, all pretty much anything, whether it's notes, whether it's Word, whether it's even Twitter and all the socials, there's a little sort of microphone icon that appears on the keyboard, and you literally press that and just talk into the iPhone, and whatever you say comes out on the screen as words. Now, admittedly, 6 or 7 years ago, it was prone to error. Now I find it's incredibly accurate. It even understands my Northern English accent, and it understands my diction, and it understands punctuation as well. So you can say the cat sat on the mat, full stop, new line, and it does all of that for you. And then literally, if I'm typing that into the Notes app, I'll literally just email it to myself and then copy and paste it into Word for Windows to do the editing.
So did you, before you started writing or dictating, did you come up with a structure? Did you have some form of storyboarding or pagination? Did you do anything like this, or did it come later?
Yeah, I think the original structure for the book was loosely based on the structure of the talk that I gave at those two conferences, and when I started writing it, that was the process that I went through. I guess over the course of the next year, I also got involved in Upreneur Summit, and I prepared another speech for that, and some of the material that ended up in that speech actually felt as if it fitted within the book as well. So that sort of made me rearrange the order of proceedings a little bit, but it was pretty much I had a series of headings which I guess turned into chapters in the final book, And then it was just a question of allocating the stories and the arguments that were stored here in the brain into those sections. So a lot of, I guess, talking and dictating was just a way of getting all of those words out into that basic structure.
Did you have a particular goal in terms of, word count or page count, or did you say when it's finished, it'll be finished, and I'll take a look at what it looks like?
That's a really good question. I did do some research to find out what the sort of average size of a business book was, and then discovered that actually there isn't one. So some of them, some say 20,000 words is fine, which is relatively low. Others talk about 100,000 words. I ended up writing about 60, it was just under 60,000 words after editing, and that felt about right. It's about 200 pages in terms of the pagination and font size that I have in the book, and as a rough guide, it was about as thick as most of the business books that I was happy to read, so it sort of felt right, but there was no science behind it at all.
Were there some, and I mean this because I'm very curious, so were there some high point, but also maybe some low points during the capturing of your thoughts and ideas?
Yeah, I mean, I think I wrote the book in two massive spurts with probably about 2 or 3 months in between. I can't remember. I sort of slowed down and literally wrote nothing for nearly 3 months, and then suddenly just picked it all up again. I can't remember what that was. It might have been I was busy with other stuff. I may have just didn't have the enthusiasm for a while. And then after I got towards pretty much the end of it, so after that second spurt, and what I really did struggle with, Pascal, was the conclusion. So I'd written almost like the first 2 acts, and then I just couldn't actually get it finished. I just struggled with that nuance. And the way I cracked that, funnily enough, was I ended up, just like you're doing here, I was interviewing for my marketing and finance podcast another marketing person. And they made some fairly bold statements about integrity and the fact that a marketing person should feel privileged at being able to develop products and to communicate with his audience. And I realised that was actually the central theme of the book, really, once you got beyond the keeping it simple, and that gave me that conclusion. And once I had that, then it was I could just see it, and literally wrote the end of the book within an hour or so.
It's fascinating because that's the tension, not to use a too strong a term, between the solitary activity of writing the book, but actually getting inspiration from external factors such as speaking at an event, talking to somebody else, or even just going for a walk and so on. Actually, talking of which, did you dictate a lot going for walks then?
Oh yes, as you know, I love going down to my favourite little harbour down Fisherow Harbour near where I live, and quite a lot of the chapters were done. Me walking along the promenade, walking along the harbour with my iPhone in hand, and the beauty of it is of course that the majority of people who saw me doing that were just thinking I was having a conversation with somebody on the phone. At least it wasn't, whereas I'm wandering around with a camera with a great big microphone on the top. That makes you look like a bit of a prat, but most people have got no problem with people walking along with a phone in their hand.
So you end up in a position, you have, let's say, draft 1, and from what I understand of the art of copywriting, then begins the real kind of thankless task of going back and finding ways you could improve, things you have to take out, which is always very, very painful. So what would you like to work on the other versions to finally have the copy that we're going to see when the book is out?
Yeah, that is hard, Pascal, because it's like any content that you put together. You've invested so much time and effort into it that you then feel almost guilty at going and stripping stuff out, and I think you do need help. So the way I decided to do it is that I would go through it once it had finished. I went through the whole thing again, and tried to streamline it, tried to cut out what I would have thought was padding or superfluous. And actually quite a lot of the rules that I teach in the book about keeping things simple actually had to apply, and that was always in the back of my mind. I can't write a book about keeping things simple and not using too much language if I actually end up doing all of that in the book itself. So I had to be seen to be following my own rules. So for example, I am a massive backlash against passive sentences. I have been all through my career, and whilst I can't guarantee there are no passive sentences in the book, I'm pretty sure there aren't that many. There may be one or two, but that was right in the back of my head all the way through. If I come across a passive sentence, it has to be changed to active because I make such a big deal out of that. So you have to be incredibly ruthless with yourself. And again, a lot of these stories are, really quite heartfelt. And I guess as a filmmaker and editor, you'd understand this as well. It's all about pacing, and I did get to that stage where I felt, yeah, I can take this out, and it doesn't actually affect the message, but it speeds it up. Then I gave it to a developmental editor, and the developmental editor really tightens up the structure. Maybe suggest that the chapter orders might need to be changed, or that sort of thing. And in fairness, she came back to me and said, you've got two really big stories in this book, and they are very long. And she did say to me, normally I would go through these stories and trim them right down. And she did say, however, I do love the way you've written them, and I just didn't know where to start with it. So all I'm going to do, and this is a bit of a cop-out, and she did give me a bit of a discount as a result, she says, I think you should chop these down a bit, but I didn't feel as if I could. Now, I don't know whether that genuinely was a cop-out or not. So all I could do in those circumstances was to share those stories with a few people and sort of say, here's before, and then I went in and chopped some stuff out. And in the end I did. I managed to get them reduced in size quite a bit, but I think it was all a pacing thing, and knowing which bits didn't actually add to the message. It was just superfluous description, I guess. And then finally it was edited by a proofreader, and that was really just from the point of view of making sure there was no spelling mistakes and the punctuation was right. And one of the things I did find, sometimes when I was writing or dictating, I would speak in the first person. Sometimes I would speak in the second person, other times I'm in the third person. And future tense, past tense, all of that became a bit of a mess. And the first time I edited it, I thought, I don't like the tense here, so I changed the tenses, and then decided that they were all right the first way. And oh my goodness, so you need somebody to help you with that, the grammatical stuff, I guess.
Our viewers and listeners actually might be curious about how to build, that extended team. So, perhaps it was very simple, but how did you find the editor and the proofreader?
Well, again, it was all from my local network. The developmental editor was Denise Cowell, who was a member of the Content Marketing Academy, and she'd been at the speech about the cat on the mat, so she sort of felt that she knew a little bit about things. The proofreading lady was called Alison, and she was recommended to me by our good friend Mr. Richard Tubb.
All right.
So as you would expect, it was people from the local community, and the cover of the book was done by Cole Gray, who is the genius who runs Pixels Inc. and has done graphical design for many of our friends. So yeah, it's quite a nice local close-knit little team, and all of the people involved.
Yeah, that's lovely. It feels like it's all kind of family venture of sort, Obviously, I can't help but always make analogies between that and filmmaking. I hope people will forgive, or by now, they will have moved on. But where film production, starts often is by creating the teaser trailer, the poster, and you almost visualize, and then we use that sometimes to motivate ourselves in crafting, the script or whatever else.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have the title in mind quite early on? Did you have the cover in mind, or did that come much, much later?
I think I always had it in my head that the cover would be a cat sitting on a mat. However, a lot of people said to me, for goodness sake, don't call it something like you've called it. So it's called Cats, Mats and Marketing Plans. And a lot of people said, if you call it that, nobody will find it in search. Nobody will know what it's about. And you should call it like Marketing for Dummies, or Marketing Made Simple, or Keeping Marketing Simple, or how to make marketing strategy easy, or something like that. And you know what, Pascal? I had another of those sort of penny drop moments. Even though I'm passionate about this book and I've spent, getting on for 3 years working on it, it's not going to be a gigantic global bestseller. It's not going to make me millions of pounds. And it may well be that only people within my local network and my slightly extended network buy it. So I came to the conclusion that I didn't have to have a boring generic title. Cats, Mats and Marketing Plans is different. It stands out a bit. And one of the messages that I have in the book is that people and businesses don't do enough to try and stand out. They're happy to conform to some sort of normality. So I just felt if I called it Marketing for Dummies or Marketing Made Simple, it would just be another one of those Marketing Made Simple books. Cats, Mats and Marketing Plans might not be something that somebody might go and search for, but if they do come across it, it does stand out. And because it's mainly going to be, I'm going to be mainly using this as almost like a fat business card. I can hand it out to conferences if we ever get back to going to live conferences. I didn't think it actually mattered. So once I overcame that, in my head, it was just a question of saying to Cole Gray, I've always had this idea that it would be a cat sat on a mat, and that's the title of the book. And, he's a very, very good designer, but when he came back with the first draft, it was pretty much it. I changed a couple of slight bits about the tail. Originally went a bit further down than it does, but as soon as I saw it, I just thought, wow, that is absolutely what I wanted. And I knew that I wanted the mat to be magenta, which is a posh way of saying pink, and that there it was.
So for our viewers, our listeners, are going to have to imagine, but can you please, would you mind showing the cover?
Here is the cover.
Yeah.
So apologies, this is one of the printer proofs, so it's got the not for resale. But yeah, it says Cats, Mats and Marketing. It has got a byline. It says how to build a simple marketing strategy and avoid complexity as your business grows. So I guess that was me hedging my bets and making sure that if somebody didn't really know what it was about, that would tell them. And the magenta thing, again, I alluded to a company that I used to work for called Bright Grey, which was 20 years ago nearly now. And the joke about Bright Grey was, even though the company was called Bright Grey, the logo was pink. And that was my little sort of throwback to the old days.
And that's why it's nice when this project can be led by personal insights and kind of key messages. Very quickly, talking about the printing of the book, how do you make the decision quite early on to go the self-publishing route, which I think is what you've done, as opposed to going through a publishing house?
I think it was a conversation with Chris Ducker, actually. I had never even thought about going to a publishing house because I just thought there are loads of marketing books and I just didn't think that I could pitch it successfully enough. I mean, who the hell is Roger Edwards? I'm not a massive, well-known American marketing guru. I just didn't think I would be able to pitch it. Plus, I think it was Chris again who told me that even if you get a really good deal through a printer, a publishing house, you still have to do all of the work in terms of marketing it. They may give you an advance, but they're not actually going to go out there, unless you're J.K. Rowling or Tom Peters or something like that. They're not going to heavily promote it. And if you're going to be doing that yourself, then go for the self-publish route, because then you'll be able to earn a little bit more as a royalty on sales than you would through a publishing house. And it was quite an easy decision to do once I had that advice, to be perfectly honest.
So you received obviously a box with the not for sale samples week ago, 2 weeks ago.
I've had them for about 2 weeks now.
2 weeks,
Yes.
yeah. What was that like to receive that parcel at the door?
Oh, do you know what? I mean, to hold it in your hand, to flick through it, and this is a bit creepy, but to smell it, there's just something about a proper book, isn't there, that you don't get from the Kindle. And we had a bit of an emotional moment in the house when my wife saw the copy, and she knows how much time has gone into it, and so yeah, it was quite. I did have a few tears in my eyes, I have to say, when it actually arrived.
Of course, if we can't be, our biggest fan, and if we can't celebrate our victories, it would be such a shame.
Yeah.
So, well, I can't obviously let you go just yet without talking about the key messages that you've been sharing for quite some time, but also that are at the heart of the book. So, can I, take advantage of your kindness and talk about removing complexity and letting go of BS in the world of marketing? So, what are we going to learn from the book?
Yeah, I think the thrust of the book is that I feel that at the moment there are three major problems with marketing. The first problem is, I suppose it's not a problem as such, is that in the world that we live in at the moment, marketing is synonymous with communication, in my mind. So if you go to a marketing conference, all you'll hear about is how to use social media, how to use advertising, how to use Facebook ads, how to use Google AdWords, how to use email, how to use webinar. It's all about the communication. But I was classically trained as a marketer way back at my university days, and I do include some of that in the book. And marketing is so much more than the communication. It's customer research, it's segmentation, it's targeting, it's positioning, creating a product, creating a service, pricing that product and service. And then once you've done all of that, that's when you start inventing all the communication through advertising, email, whatever it is. But I think that a lot of companies and a lot of individuals have lost sight of that, and they just talk about the communication. And because of that, because they forget about all the other stuff, or worse, they're not even responsible for that other stuff, something gets lost along the way, and there's a disconnect between what people are communicating and what the offer actually is. The second thing is that I find that a lot of marketing these days is just plain annoying. Again, you get spammed to death with emails. Sign up for a webinar and they'll send you 8 emails every hour to remind you. Connect with somebody on LinkedIn and they'll spam you with a DM within 10 seconds saying buy my stuff. You go onto a newspaper website, the Guardian or the Daily Mail or whatever you want to read, and there's so many pop-up ads and video ads and things that move in to cover what you're trying to read. It's just plain annoying. And the third thing is the complexity of language that a lot of people use. And I understand why that happens, because a lot of industries, I worked in financial services for a long time. Every industry has its own language, and marketers will use that language to communicate, but ultimately the end customer probably doesn't understand it. It's almost like, you go to France and you don't speak French, it's difficult to understand what people are saying. But it's the same if you go into a financial services firm. People speak financial services, but normal people don't necessarily understand that language. So unless they learn it, they're going to feel excluded by it. So the book is really trying to solve those three things, making it more about just communication. So it's all about how do you build your offer. Secondly, how to make it engaging. So use content, a lot of the stuff that you and I are passionate about in terms of putting vlogs together, podcasts like this, other forms of content. And finally, how to strip that language right down into its simplest form so that everybody can understand it, whether they're an expert or not.
Thanks very much for the reminder. And, it's true. I mean, you and I have chosen marketing as a career. and we're very proud of it. And sometimes, our wins at what people may make of it in 2020 and 2021, where the exposures has been essentially, the hacks and the tricks on social media and websites and so on. Because ultimately, we are there to be, the customer's champions as well as the brand or organization's champion, by defending both cases and seeing that there's got to be somewhere in the middle that we can meet together. But there are countless, very good examples out there, people doing it right. But interestingly, I think people will remember when it doesn't work. So, I had a conversation where, because of lockdown, my inbox has got so many emails now from companies that sometimes I've not heard of for a while, or the same company, but they seem to have multiplied by to the tune of 10 the number of instances they want to email me. And I get it, people are under pressure, they're worried about sales targets and so on, but there's got to be a better way.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, one of the things I've noticed recently, I've actually responded to a few of these emails today as well, is that somebody will send you an email, and then you get these constant follow-ups. I call it the circling back email. So the first email says, buy my stuff, and then the second one is just circling back to see whether you got the first email, and then a few days later there'll be the just following up to see whether my original email got lost in the inbox, or I'm just bubbling it back to the surface, and you think, oh, for goodness sake, I don't want any of this. Unsubscribe, or not even unsubscribe. I never subscribed in the first place.
For me, recently, what I'm getting a lot of are offers from content agencies saying, we read your blog, we think your blog is amazing, we'd like to submit some guest contribution in exchange for a link. And I'm thinking, well, you must be a genius, because I only do video. So whatever you've read, I'm not sure what it is, but equally, I'm not going to have a complete stranger just adding content to my website. It's just all bizarre. And then, there's 3, 4, 5 times the chase, no matter how many times you say, I'm not interested, and so on. It's just a very, very strange. And I'm just worried generally that that's the impression people have of the function of content marketing. But I think in general, there are more good examples than bad ones.
One of the phrases from my book, and I probably will be able to say this exactly, is, when I've gone through all of those reasons why marketing is annoying, I say something like, if as a consumer you don't like it when marketers do this to you, why do you think it's all right as a marketer to do it to your customers? And I always try to have that in my head when I'm putting an email campaign together or a promotional campaign. Would I be happy to receive this? Would I be annoyed by this? Would I be enraged by this? And if the answer's yes, then probably shouldn't be doing it.
I know. Well, listen, before you go, and as a thank you, I would like you to take part in a fun quiz, Roger, if you don't mind.
Okay.
So some silly questions, and then we'll wrap up with, where people can get in touch with you. So to begin with, if you could have a Zoom call with a famous person, be it from the world of science, entertainment, or business, who would be on the Zoom call with you?
My goodness, the number of people would be astonishing. It would probably have to be it would probably be a movie star. Somebody who comes to mind for some reason is Bruce Willis. Action-packed hero, like his sense of humour. Bruce Willis, let's go for him.
All right.
Yippee-ki-yay!
I know you're very fond of music. Actually, you teach me so much about the world of music. So if you could have your own private online concert, let's say on Facebook Live, you and your family could listen to a band or an artist, who would that be?
Oh, my goodness. Well, if it was just me and the family were tied up and gagged, it would be Genesis, because Genesis is my favourite group of absolute all time, and I was meant to be going to see them in December, but that's been delayed till April, and I still don't think it'll be in April. But the family don't particularly like Genesis, and I get into trouble when I play them. So I think it would probably be somebody a little bit more accessible, like, I don't know, something like Take That, or there's a German band called Scooter that we all like as well.
Okay. All right, let's go for that. So, since you have the pleasure of watching this band playing for you, you can also order some food for you and the family. So, what would you order?
It would be curry. It would be curry. We would get. I would have a chicken madras or a chicken dopiatza. My wife would probably have chicken rogan josh or something like that. There'd be lots of poppadoms and probably onion barges as well.
Okay, excellent. Listen, if you could host your own radio show, what would you talk about and who would be your co-host?
Oh, goodness gracious. Now, we had a conversation similar to this a few days ago. I've always fancied running my own radio show. In fact, I've had the pleasure of being on a few radio shows where they talk to you for a couple of hours and you've got to give them your top 10 songs. But you've always had that problem of being able to use music in a podcast without paying ludicrously high performance rights fees. But recently Spotify have now changed the rules. Well, they've not changed the rules, they've come up with an accommodation which says that you can use Anchor, which is a podcasting platform, to create a radio show using songs on Spotify, to effectively create your own playlist, and you can talk over the top of it. So yes, I would probably do that, and it would probably be a prog rock radio show with me playing stuff like Genesis and annoying the family even more. So my co-host would have to be a prog rock god. So possibly somebody like Phil Collins or Fish from Marillion, who just lives up the road. Actually, his real name's Derek Dick. He lives in Haddington. Fish from Marillion.
Excellent. So, final question for you. All this will be behind us at some stage. We'll be able to travel more freely again. Where would you like to go with your family?
Gosh, we've done a lot of travelling throughout our family life, and we just like beaches, Pascal. Over the years, I've been to beaches in the Caribbean. I've been to beaches in Mauritius. I know you've been there too. The Mediterranean has always been one of our favourite destinations. I just think because of the complete lack of travel that we've had, we'd like to go back somewhere close at hand, something like the north of Mallorca or Croatia or something like that. Just somewhere sunny with a nice beach and crystal clear water and a bar nearby where I can buy some beer.
Excellent. Well, listen, Roger, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you back on the Content Marketing Studio to talk about your book, Cats, Mats, and Marketing Plans. I have no doubt people will have more questions about not just the book, but also marketing and removing complexity. What is the best way to find out more about Roger Edwards on the interweb?
Okay, the website is rogeredwards.co.uk. Put a /book after that if you want this dedicated page for the book. I thought I'd keep that simple, book. And on Twitter, that's the social media platform I tend to use the most. It's at Roger_Edwards. So hit me up on the website or hit me up on Twitter.
Well, thank you again to you and to our viewers and listeners. I hope that was actually a great inspiration for you to move on to perhaps becoming a book author, trying to demystify and clarify the steps you could go through. Until the next one, make sure to go out there and create better content faster. Bye for now.